Welcome everyone to the latest edition of Breaking the Silence, the conversations. And today I'm delighted to converse. We don't say podcasting, converse with a gentleman I've been looking forward to speaking to. Actually, he's an international scientific colleague from ex-pharma, I'm going to say, but has had a career within various aspects of the pharmaceutical industry. His name's Steve Berry, coming today from Ontario, Canada. It took a little bit of time to sort out the time difference between the two, but we've nailed down a slot. Working initially in your career, you worked in sales and then sort of went into marketing and communications aspects of the pharmaceutical industry, and I've got a few stories to tell. But I think you got out, you were saying on the pre-record, just before the COVID era, as it were, because you foresaw what was to come, and we'll dig into that as we go through the interview. And then just talk about general aspects of the pharmaceutical industry that have jumped off the page as behaviour that is questionable. So thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity.
Good to chat. So if you can, in the pre-record, you gave us a bit of a sort of rundown on your career, and I've just whizzed through that whistle stop. Do you want to just let the viewers know about how your career spanned before COVID, before you left, and just a quick whistle stop?
Sure. I found myself, I worked in a hospital setting, quite honestly, during my university days. So I got a good view of how hospitals were run. I actually worked in psychiatry. No, I wasn't a patient. I was an orderly at the time, a stronger guy or be on the ward. But we actually had a healthcare plan. We were an instrumental part of the actual team. So during those 4 years, while going through university, I got a bird's eye view of actually how hospitals work, doctors, nurses, medication profiles, et cetera. And after the completion of my degree, I took a different juncture. I was in just a basic sales. I wasn't sure where I was going to go, but I always had an aspiration to get into pharmaceuticals. And many of my friends were like, "You sure you want to go over?" I said, "Listen, it's very lucrative." And I think the idea that I was helping people, I really did see that after being in a hospital setting, right or wrong, I saw that there were patients being cared for, not just, in psychiatry, but certainly in orthopedics and other divisions. And so I found myself attracted to that. And I pushed myself hard and got in. They said it's a very lucrative industry to get into, but it's also very difficult. But I did get in. I got in 1999, young buck, maybe a bit green, but not green from the sales side, but was able to master the medical jargon that came through. There was a lot of tests and stuff. We had a thing called the APMR at the time, the Accredited Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Representative. And I showed some doctors this. So it's a very lengthy and almost like a med school condensed, but enough to know that you would have the smarts, if you will, and the abilities to talk to physicians. They want to make sure you actually were smart enough to know and to understand medical terminology. So no problem. I passed that with flying colors.
And that's ultimately who you're pitching to at the end, isn't it? As well as the public, you're pitching to
essentially,
doctors.
yes. And so the pharmaceutical industry, as you may be well aware, I know you're in England, it's different, but probably the same principles like as in Canada or in America, which I worked for an American outfit at the time. It was based on how do we engage physicians and the medical community to save lives. I mean, all the mission statements, the vision statements were always around helping. So there was nothing nefarious or negative. It was really, I think, genuine, or led us to believe genuine intent to save lives, to make medical applications, medicine become better for the world, right? And so we all bought into that. Likely nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, there was a quick thing. We had a product we were going to sell for hypertensive, and it showed by post-marketing data that it was no longer going to be eligible. So after 2 major studies, they pulled it from the shelves. They were honest about it. They were honest about Tequin, gadaflaxacin. It's an antibiotic, broad spectrum. It had hypo and hyperglycemia. And our company willingly played by the rules, recognized that it had enough, that it was warranted to take it off the market. So
how long ago were the good old days where you were seeing early warning signals and removing from the shelves? There's maybe a suggestion of like a hypoglycemia here or hyperglycemia.
Yeah, so I think that gave me, even if I had any doubts at that time, but there was scruples, I guess. People were honestly looking for the health and well-being of people. So how could I say no to that? I said it was genuine. It's only as I was leaving the industry, as I saw more and more turned a blind eye. Is that the word you want to use? Or just pushing things further or investments into things that didn't make sense. The direction of the companies that were saying we're looking on this molecule, and you never see things come to fruition. And after a while, you're like, I don't see this as the case. And so, not disgruntled, but just sort of like, where are we going? There was a set of honesty in the early 2000s, and you saw it wane. That's in my opinion. But the companies were no longer we've always been driven by profit, but now it seemed to be even more paramount. Like,
And
what
did
can we
that kind
get
of happen
next?
overnight, Steve? Was that kind of like going from patient-centered, like you say, seeing the early warning signs, to the two famous quotes I commonly tweet about are, follow the money. There's a money aspect that over usurps patient care and safety, and then it's that thing about a patient cure is a customer loss. It's money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Did you
Well,
suddenly
I
see
think
that
what
creeping?
happens, they may have been, if remember, it's always about money, and any job is about money. That I'm not naive. We all took business classes, but I think what startled me is that there's a line of what do you need to make and for how much, and then at what cost. So what price is paradise, right? And so if they didn't like somebody, they'd take it off the shelf because it wasn't making enough. I mean, I spoke to, I'll say his name, a very good guy. It was Dr. Don Lowe. His predecessor took over, Dr. Tony Mazzulli. And Tony and I had an open chat when we talked about antibiotics. He said, Stephen, do you realize that no one in your industry, all the companies, no longer have a vested interest in producing or acquiring any new molecules for antibiotics because there's no money to be made. It's a seasonal thing at best. It's a short-term fix. It's 10 days, maybe 14 days. Maybe it's an IV drip if you're in a hospital. But he said, no one's inventing anymore. And he says his fear was after vancomycin, what do we have as doctors? They were worried. What are we going to do to help the patients? And I looked at him with a straight face and said, it's a very valid point. I'm a nobody to express what the uppers are, but the uppers are not looking for healthcare of the individual. Where's the money going to be made? What's the new drug that's going to support them for long term? But you're going to be on it forever. That's ideally what they want. The statins, the hyperintensive medications, anything that gave them, and they started doing joint ventures. Like Sanofi was working with, say, Bristol Myers, and you're trying to coordinate even efforts to minimize the impact of studying for new molecule to make more cost and cut costs and make more money. And that was no longer, to me, that was like we lost focus on what I thought our goals were to save people, right? I mean, that's
There was
really what.
definitely money in pandemics, let's say. So I know you talked just pre-record the first
Yeah.
sort of SARS that came around. Can you tell us a bit
Mhm.
about that and what alarm bells were ringing in? I think it's kind of what formed the start of your awakening, from what you were saying, really. That
For sure, yeah. Well, so I did have the pleasure of knowing Dr. Don Lowe, who was the Canadian go-to individual when SARS presented itself. So we say SARS-CoV-1, not COVID-2, was in Toronto. I think you recall the AC/DC and Rolling Stones did a concert. Mass hysteria here, closing hospitals, closing streets. Maybe to me, I think it was a test. I didn't see it at 2003. That was circa 2003. But I did my research after the fact. Only 44 mainstream media noted deaths. 44. That doesn't give me the indication it's the pandemic. I don't even think there was a SARS-CoV at that time to illustrate that was what the cause of death was. There might have been other consequences, but 44 is not what was warranted. And as you probably know, Dave, we moved on to MERS 2014, the Middle Eastern respiratory, and I'm like, okay, maybe. Then by 2019, I said, something's not right here. We're fighting a disease, but no one has shown to be, the pathogen hasn't been isolated. And what are we treating with? And we got four companies coming to the table, not the traditional vaccine makers that would be, one would hope to have at the forefront, if this is real, to have all the best minds studying frantically, right? Warp speed, as Mr. Trump said, to get to save humanity. And my alarm bells went off at that point saying, that's got to stop. The main guys that made vaccines were not involved. And that's when I said there's something really very wrong here. Very wrong.
let's dig into that a little bit. So the big vaccinology companies are. Let us
Yeah.
know for people
So
who don't know pharmaceutical who are watching. The GSK,
So
Novartis.
it's GSK, Sanofi, Merck, Roche, Novartis, Aventis. And I say these repeatedly quickly because it was part of my background. And
And
we
they were
competed.
nowhere near it, were they? They were nowhere near it, and there wasn't any discussion around the old way the vaccines were made. Was there? It
Yeah.
was very much this new technology that there's a lot of
Bristol
evidence
Myers,
backing.
Janssen, they all did the broad spectrums. I mean, this is where I was a bit well, shaken, I guess the word, because I looked at my wife at the time. I said, honey, this doesn't make sense. There's only four guys out of at least 25, 30 companies. And if you weren't a vaccine maker, you could lend your scientists to jump in, right? Because they on the news said this is very serious, it's deadly, and it's killing thousands by the day. So I'm like, well, logically, wouldn't you put your best scientists to get on this? If that was the case, and it certainly wasn't. So I said, you had four makers. So Sanofi, J&J does Band-Aids, AstraZeneca does heart medication, and I said, Moderna, if you switch it around, Dave, I don't know if you know, modern DNA. It's almost like they told us. When you get awake, or when you become awake, you see that they're actually telling us. Now it's like a method of revelation. You've just told me what you're doing, and now I'm awake to see you just told me the truth, which is a lie, but now I know what you're up to.
And Moderna have never had any business in vaccines at all.
No,
It come from nowhere.
it's Sure. And then, of course, Sputnik, I think, aroused me to say, wait, Russia has their own version, which, again, international community, United Nations are not pulling together. Someone's not talking to the left and right hand. So I looked and said, so they got Sputnik. Now, of all the names you could come up with, because I was awake, I said, that's being almost like farcical. You're making fun of people. You're laughing at us. The next thing that's important, I don't know if you looked at my profile, Dave, but Covidian. Now, Covidian is a medical company. It's now called Medtronic. I do know the company. They were a big company out of Boston, Mass. They actually advertised what we call baseball over here in North America. You can still see it on Getty Images. It's not a lie. 1998 or 1999, Covidian. Take out the IEN and it's COVID. I mean, that's why you saw Trump argue with, well, what are you going to call it? Coronavirus, going to call it the crown. China's want to be called China virus. I mean, all the lies and smoke and mirrors. At the end of the day, he said, we'll call it COVID. I mean, it's almost laughable at that. At that point, I said, now you're really tricking us. And it's heartbreaking because I'm like, now you've got so many people falling for this, and you have a nefarious plan to develop a product, which is untested, and it's mRNA, not from a dead virus, but traditional vaccines are made from. So this is where, for me at least, and some of my surrounding people caught on, but most didn't. They didn't believe me. They said, you're making it up. I trust the science. I'm like, but this isn't the science. There's no
So
science behind it.
generally speaking, how long would it take from concept to producing a vaccine? What's the sort of lead time on that?
Yeah, well, okay. Now each company would have their scruples intact. Probably anywhere from 4 to 7 years, because you're looking at the manufacture of how the pathogen grows, not just in the petri dish that you would recall for your biology, but you're looking at the stages of being used, and and then is it 7 days? Is it 10 days? Is it 500 milligrams? Is it 250 milligrams? Is it better IV? Like there's many sources, in order to either dissolve what they're hoping to achieve, whether the pathogen inside the body, and you do your post-marketing, it is in the body. First, it's in vitro, and then you move out, right? So, it's usually 4 to 7 years, and that's because that's being honest. That's where you can see that it's going to work.
Mm.
I think there was a lot of people who just said this is going to work from warp speed, and they just jumped on it because it was scare tactics. That's what the media did through whoever's behind it to scare people to get it, and at any cost, get it because you're going to die.
Have you seen any convincing evidence of coronavirus isolation?
I I've looked. I have seen nothing to that effect. I've asked people who said, "Do you have the pathogen? Show me." They just said, "Well, the studies have shown." But what studies? I've never seen them. They're not being published, and that's why I think it's very sad that people like Trump will get on a TV set and point to Fauci, and Fauci points to someone else, and no one, because they can't take ownership. They say we don't have it, but people are blurred by that acting or just the sideshow to get them enthralled to say, well, they are working on something, maybe an honest effort. They think it's from China, but they still don't know where it's coming from. If it was real, they still can't definitively point where it's from. And I asked people,
They're almost mocking us as well, because when it all broke out, not only the coverage and the media propaganda, but they really expected humankind to believe that it was from a punter eating bat soup down the road from the Fauci-enabled gain-of-function virology lab, Wuhan, just down the road up there. People fell for that bat-eating nonsense. I mean, it was a stone's throw from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they're funding gain-of-function. That's not a conspiracy theory anymore. They've admitted it. The funds have been followed there.
Sure.
The bat lady, I forgot her name now, Dr. Wei, somebody, I went to her
I
name.
can't, Dr. Wei, WEI, I think, but I think a lot of them are all in cahoots. That's the reality, right? I mean,
what do you think this is all about, like with a wider lens? What's your view?
Yeah.
I know we followed each other on Twitter for a while, so I know that you've got sort of I'm not going to call them rabbit holes. I think rabbit holes is disrespectful, but once you awaken, we talk pre-record that once you awaken to one thing, it kind of follows domino style, that you wake up to.
I think yes, I think well said. You could connect the dots, and
Yes.
So staying on course with you, because I don't want to go any rabbit holes. What I would, for dot connection from this perspective, many say Bill Gates is, and I'm not saying Bill Gates, he's just the face of the so-called champion of vaccines. He says he's there to save lives in Africa, save lives in South America, save lives worldwide. He's invested money through Microsoft, if that's even true. I think he's a front man for whatever. But barring that, let's just say his intentions were to help humanity. So be it. When one has to start asking, okay, why does he have a vested interest and not like the United Nations or more medical doctors to spear? He's not a doctor. More importantly, he wasn't even head of a pharmaceutical outfit. Now, you could say Borla from Pfizer has a vested interest to make shareholder money, and certainly they certainly all did. And the board of directors, et cetera, from Pfizer may have a nefarious plan, I think, in place, and that's connected. So now you could say, well, between the World Health Organization, Tedros was involved in the cholera breakout in Ethiopia. We all know that. Whether he did a good job or mismanaged, one could say his name was on that blueprint. So you have to start connecting dots, saying, well, he made a mockery of that or didn't address it like he should have. Was he even competent to take the role of health director of World Health Organization, if we even want to see the World Health Organization as a legitimate body? So you got to put World Health, United Nations, you got the major governments between China. Xi did the Sino-virus or vaccine. You had Sputnik from Russia. You had Warp Speed from COVIDian. I put all the dots together, and then you say, well, what's the real goal? So if Bill Gates was involved in depop, population perhaps, but there is a nefarious plan, to your point, on gain of function. So when we connect gain of function, no COVID virus found, many people did die, but not from the COVID virus. It's back to pharma. So that's where my lights come off. Milazepam, remdesivir, obviously the ventilators. We don't talk about that. There were people dancing in hospitals. And then you get into, this is important for you, because 2012, this is the other thing when you wake up, what was a hospital point of view at an Olympics? See, that's what you have to ask yourself. In 2012, I had this dancing, looked like, you can call him sane, you can call him deaf, the Grim Reaper. He had a wand, looked like a needle, and all these kids running around with scary nightmares coming at you. And I'm thinking, so you don't have to be religious and Christian. You could just say, that to me comes across as demonic or satanic or just unhealthy. So little kids being scared is not funny. At the time I wasn't awake in 2012. Not really. Couldn't understand why they had a medical aspect at the British Olympics. And then only to find out, like, yeah, people being scared and running around, and nurses. And then later on, it's what we call foretelling or foreshadowing or method of revelation. So then you saw 2024 at Paris.
I was going to say Paris. We need to mention Paris.
When you're awake, I don't watch TV that way. I came on after on YouTube and watched it. And my wife and I looked and said, there's a headless people and blood and revolution. I'm thinking, how is that? Again, any context to a sporting event where it's supposed to bring in competition and fairness and emblazoning the humanity coming together. I'm seeing death and destruction like in 2012. You're killing people.
Did you see the bit on the bridge where they've got the dancers? They're doing sort of hip hop dancing. They're dropping down on the floor, clutching their chest. And you're like, how clear does it have to be? We talked about this, like, if they tell you what they're doing, then you've almost by default agreed to it by not protesting. So,
I think, yeah, if you don't, I guess their point is, under this method of revelation, if you've read this before, the point is, if I tell you what I'm going to do to you, and if you're not smart enough or too ignorant to know what I'm going to do after I just told you, then it falls on you, and it's no malice. They actually believe that. There's no malice to my intent of what I've done to you in harmful ways, because I told you what I'm going to do. I mean, it's as bizarre as it is. And rightly, how do you blame them? They're actually getting away with it. Like, so the Satan Bowl, we call it, the Super Bowl, which is also the next big thing. We call it the Satan Bowl here in North America because, and I don't watch anymore because I can't be bothered. It's all rigged anyhow. But let's just say for a fact, what does it do? It brings masses of people together. They watch this. And then if you watch, I'll show you a video clip, Dave. I'll send it to you on Twitter. There's a Kendrick Lamar, right or wrong, good or bad. I don't care. I think he's awful, but his dance moves and walks around and all his, no bad lyrics per se. But if you listen, there's a hangman coming from the way they did the strategy. There's a hangman falling from the light. Why was the lights? Like, is that a 15-minute city? Like, you have to start, see, when you're awake, you start putting dots together, but there's a bigger plan to lock humanity in. It's nothing about bringing people together and helping each other. It's quite the opposite, quite honestly. And that's my take, but what I'm seeing. So, sorry, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go right back to the start, really. So just before, because you got out, didn't you, just before? What led to that decision? What led to that 2019 exit? And just a sort of tag-on question, were you seeing signs that we were prepping for something, that something was coming? Was there sort of ripples coming through?
The 2019 the COVID scare was the final nail in the coffin for me, because I knew at that point only four makers, when they weren't true makers per se, and I'm like, no, that was the final. And then I guess harkening back to a story of a young man accosting me in my early days, almost telling me that we make the disease, we don't cure the disease, and they were all in on it. And at that time, I dismissed him. That was back in 1999 outside a hospital. This guy was, it was just funny. It's almost like he played his part, but I didn't know at the time. And I looked at the guy and I actually laughed. I said, not at him. I laughed at my colleagues. I said, the guy's obviously crazy. I mean, as if we would make our own diseases and never want to cure anybody. I said, we'd be killing our own people. And I walked into a meeting with the doctors and let it go. But now I think, wow, he was telling me something that he was really awake, but we're really not there for the sake of helping others. There was never a true plan for medicine, which you took a note for, to save lives. It was almost like we're going to make money where we can on a disease that's meant from every angle, not just pharmaceutical grade products that don't resolve the issue, but like healthcare. Like, why are we going to McDonald's and pushing advertisements and having sports figures that kids look up to, Lionel Messi or Beckham or Kane doing a commercial for Burger King? You'd be like,
Mm.
but that doesn't, they're not eating it. That's another lie. And then so the kids think, well, he can eat Burger King or these Red Bull drinks that kids are all addicted to. There's a vicious cycle all intertwined
Mm.
that are meant to make kids and people unhealthy. And they come in as a savior per se, but we can remedy this, or at least mitigate all these complications you're faced with now. So I woke up 19. That was the final thing for me. I knew then only four makers. I said, I'm out. This is not working. And I never went back.
It was around about the time when this sort of vaccine was being heralded, being
That's,
brought in, and you were
yep.
looking around thinking, where are the big boys? They seem to be right at the back, not talking about it. And then we've
Yeah. And
still
I'm
not heard
thank
from them now, have we? We've not heard anything from these big players as these other companies have made lots and lots of money. I was going to ask about mRNA technology generally. Had you heard of it yourself as it came out into the arena? Is it something you'd heard of? Or?
No, and what little research I've done and what I could acquire to get, and certainly as I stepped away from it, I explained to you, and I copy you and a few other guys, Doc Malik, and there's a couple guys in Canada I try to keep up with. Medscape is a great. They're honest. They're so honest that they don't. I think the people who are doing the peer-reviewed journals or the stuff they're doing is almost, I don't want to say laughable, because I think they have the true intent. They really believe what they've been told. So I just sent you something shortly. You'll see it today. Long COVID. There's a quiz. You can take it for fun. It's asinine because there's no long COVID. I don't believe that that's a true disease state. Although the medical community, at least I can speak for in Canada, fully agrees with it and believes whatever those papers come out with is gospel truth. Nothing, no questions barred. Can say the science has been done by these people. I trust them. And I think that's where it falls in the gaping holes that our medical community needs to be, like yourself, or a Mad Malik who said, I'm going to step away from this. I can't do this anymore. Because you have a conscience, but you also realize this is not what you signed up for. And now you're going to be the scapegoat, of course, right? Because you don't play by the rules anymore. You're not one of us. So my farmer friends wouldn't talk to me now. If I reached out and said I didn't take the jab, they'd be like, wow. And I probably would have enforced had I stayed. They probably said, because we're all medical, right? We want to be safe. So I'm sorry if I'm going off track there, but those are things that are very pivotal to know. When people take a stand, look how we're being vexed and then pushed out of society, right? We're pushed out now. It's really sad because we're trying to tell people the truth. Like, there's something wrong here.
It
I
is.
don't know.
It's a really strange phenomenon, and people call me a shell, and all you see the abuse I get online. I'm sure, and that you got to look at what people sacrificed, to speak out, and for what intention. I'm certainly not rich from it. In fact, quite the opposite end of the financial spectrum to what I used to be.
Yeah.
And I go to sleep thinking that I practiced ethically, evidence-based medicine, and with patient safety at the centre. But somehow I've lost it, and I'm probably going to get struck off for my sins. But just going to touch on what do you think the sort of pharmaceutical industry in terms of its future? Has it got all its eggs in this mRNA basket, or are
Well,
there
so,
other
and
bits
my
of?
apologies, I went a little off, David. So back to mRNA, what I have read, I now would suspect it's a true biologic. I saw that trend taking place in pharma at one point, but they were talking about biologics coming mainly to fight disease states they call like Crohn's, right? IBD or rheumatoid arthritis. They said there's biologics to be a new way of trying to mitigate or stratify how to manage the disease states as these are called. So biologics were on route, and that was probably a way of paving a nice thing for us to believe it had its good intentions again. But now you found, but as far as I'm concerned, these biologics are like gene therapy. I think there's something to be said about Ancestry 23. I don't know if you had that in England, but they did it over here. Foolish people thought it was very funny to say what their true ancestry was. I mean, it's almost like a game of, go see tarot reader and maybe she'll tell you you're going to win $1 million tomorrow, and people get all excited all day. So they did this, Ancestry 23 was really geared, in my opinion now, like looking at getting people's blood samples and able to then, acquire enough to show what can gain a function, can work on human species. And in this case, and it came from a vast array, whether you said you're Portuguese and half Spanish or half Egyptian and half black, it just, oh, you're like, okay, here it goes. And that's how people willingly gave their information, just like the swabs. I think there's something nefarious there, but you could, if you didn't take the jab, as long as you proved you didn't have COVID, which you now know, the PCR test is been debunked. It's awful. It could collect every virus around. It never proved anything. But I knew a guy that didn't want the vaccination, but he went and worked at a store, and he adamantly every day he had shift. He had to go put this up his nose. I wonder what damage he's in for, contracted at this point, because
Mm.
that's also detrimental. So I think it's gene therapy we've gone to. That's
Do you think
what
there
they
was a
saw.
harvesting of people's DNA then from the swabs?
I believe so, yes. Both sides, both the PCR test in order to acquire information genetically to help them produce other things. And now I've just said to you another link on Medscape I like looking at. I said they don't know what they're talking about only insofar as they believe what they're writing and giving out to the doctors to read. But I'm seeing it from my perspective going long COVID or whatever, or the CRISPR. There's an article on CRISPR, I'll send that to you. And I'm thinking, all you're really doing is just collecting more information on the humans to manipulate at a way of making sure we never get out of this and being in a healthy environment.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry if I,
In terms of marketing, Steve, you worked in
yes.
marketing comms. Say if you were in 2030 looking back on the whole campaign of COVID as an independent, which you are now, no, you're not associated with COVID. How would you have viewed their marketing strategy? Because we were seeing like the governor in California eating a burger and chips saying, "Come and get you." They were having to give incentives, weren't they, to go and get this safe and effective jab. They were in Holland. They were offering half an hour with a prostitute. Literally, this hit the mainstream here. So if a product's so good, it doesn't really need that level of incentivization. But we were seeing some wacky things being offered in America, across the world, Canada under Trudeau. I don't know what sort of, how would you review the marketing strategy? Also, given the fact that the pharmaceutical industry took an emergency use authorization, indemnity from prosecution from day one. How would you review the marketing strategy employed by the world in lockstep?
Sure. Well, certainly lockstep is a good word. So that'd be one of our dots we could connect, that certainly between the United Nations, the World Health Organization, between the government bodies, in this case, United States, England, France, Holland, Canada, we're all given the same memo, if you will, that how we're going to move forward with this pandemic that was very dangerous. Marketing plans would be like this. I'm sure they must have had a powwow saying, pharma. Now, notice how pharma is very clever. They allowed for you as the average individual sitting at home watching, and I remember call it was Mayor de Blasio, New York City. He took the McDonald's and the fries. I saw my own. He said, and it's an acting, takes a bite. It's at 10 o'clock morning time for us. Generally, even most Canadians or Americans don't eat a burger at 10 in the morning, generally, right? So he's biting the burger, saying, is this, and he points to obviously the director filming him. You think this is breakfast food? I could eat breakfast. If you could eat breakfast right now, and he takes a couple fries and he puts in, and the fries are great. And he says, I know you can get this free now if you go and get the COVID shot. Now it gets worse. Governor Hochul, I may say her name wrong, who took over Governor Cuomo in New York. New York is a very, now I don't care about Democrat or Republican. Let's just talk about very woke. So she was offering, this is even more sickening, offering incentives for kids to get jabbed for a lottery ticket. Yeah, a lottery ticket for your education paid. It was called uh, graduate, vaccinate, some other third. Now, pharma may have had their hands in that. I don't know, but I think it was so well designed, Dave. It was so well designed that they actually had, I don't think pharma even had to put more emphasis than they had to lure the bait. The people who are bought off, like Mayor de Blasio or Governor Hochul or even more Boris Johnson, they were told, here's your paycheck, here's what you're going to say, and action. Just like Keir Starmer right now. And here's your script. Trudeau, same thing, here's your script. But for the average person, like the TV man filming this, probably was really believing that We need this. And if it's such an incentive, why not? Like, who cares? I get a free meal. I had a guy, I'm not making this up. A neighbor came by, 48-year-old male. He said, "Oh, I went and got my shots." I said, "Tell me you didn't." I said, "I warned you." He said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to worry about what you're thinking. I even got a free sticker." And I said, "Are you bullshitting me right now?" I sorry if I swore. I said, he goes, "No." I said, "You went and got a sticker?" He goes, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" I said, "Well, first, you're not a child. And two, if you're going to take it and you want to roll the dice because you're playing Russian roulette, give me something. Give me the vaccinate, graduate, educate scam at least. Give me a lottery ticket. Give me something. Give me a free meal. Not that I want McDonald's, but you know what I mean? I mean, that's how people were they were believing so well. Whatever the government had told them or the news media told them, they just took it at face value and didn't question anything.
Is that person still alive who won the lottery to
I
their
don't
education
I
to
haven't
benefit?
I, I haven't checked it on the American website to know who if Governor Hochul gave out that award, but
Yeah.
it's so yeah. But gene therapy is real. I think it's taking precedent. And if I was in marketing now, I'm sure that the mandate. Speaking of how we would do things, I would certainly have a probably a good 25 KOLs, key opinion leaders around Canada. In this case, if it's down the States, I'd gather some Americans up and we'd have a board and we'd talk about how gene therapy is going to be used. You'll see this in my mRNA. I'll send you the paper for mRNA again, another one from Medscape. I go there, Dave. I registered a long time ago when I was in the industry. And thankfully I did because I won't get kicked out now. As long as I don't say anything bad to them, I'll get the information. It's like I'm getting insider information. But they tell us what they're doing. So essentially, there would probably be a mandate to get gene therapy into every new medicine possible. And in order to replicate so they can know exactly what would work or doesn't work on, say, Dave Cartland, what works on Steve Barry, what works on Jerry Smith. They want to know this. And I think that's the nefarious side of things. That's not the, but they'll tell you, we're helping you know what diseases you might contract and we can stop it. And I'm
And
thinking,
this is
no.
happening whether we like it or not, don't we? I mean, I
Oh,
always
yeah,
just get irritated by the reference to it as a vaccine. I've done interviews where I've held up documents from Moderna and Pfizer saying it's exactly the opposite to a vaccine. It's gene therapy,
yeah,
immunomodulatory gene therapy. You pop
yes.
up, you pop up on LinkedIn or you pop up on YouTube or you pop it on Facebook, you get taken out, nuked. So that's the next thing I wanted to ask you. Really, what's your perception of or sinisterness of the censorship of your? I know there's a lot of Canadian doctors that spoke out. I think one did some time in a psychiatric unit, didn't they? I forgot the name, but William
Well,
Mackis is doing good work. They're going after him now, William Mackis.
just a little rabbit hole and a nice rabbit hole. Sorry, not to, but in that same breath, many now say the insane asylums that were founded in the 1890s and were in 1920s and 30s were those who were not compliant to what they were asked to do. There's a photo, I got to find it, from 1915 during the so-called first flu pandemic that the guy was refusing to wear a mask and there were cops around him. Now that could be AI, I don't know, but it looked a legitimate photo. But I think that so the wives' tale is that those who are no longer playing by the rules were sent to an insane asylum. And now you just confirmed or corroborated that if this individual wasn't doing what he was told, if he wasn't playing, but his marbles weren't intact, and therefore he's now a detriment to society. We need to remove him. And I fear that's my next thing is the FEMA camps. We talk about FEMA helping, but if you, it's sort of to digress, but you know that North Carolina, there was natural causes. I won't believe they're natural, but something nefarious took place. It's lithium mines over there in North Carolina. I can show you things later if you like. But that told me, what are you doing? You're displacing people for the lucrative business of looking for lithium that's only be for AI. And we all know that that's where we're going. So you can connect the dots again slowly as you see things taking place. South Carolina had all these fires. They say there's mines through South Carolina, Georgia, all the way up to Canada. And I'll show you that article after
Clearing
this.
the decks, ready to go digging.
But that tells you. And so back to the insane asylums, what are they really going to do if, for people like you and I who refuse to participate? They can kick us out of society, which I think is coming. Like I don't know if yeah, I think it's in Britain. Amazon has pay with your palm. In America, I know that for a fact. With your palm,
My
not
kids pay
tap
for
your
the
card.
lunches with their thumbs.
Yeah, well, and then so the guy in Amazon, I'll send that video to you, but he was walking through in England, looked like, and I think you have a couple of English stores that you don't, there's no one there. You just scan and you walk in, and then you can take what you wish because you're going to get charged to your card. Now, that's bad because say you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money and you can't have a credit card. Maybe your credit card rating's bad. Well, you're not going to get into the Amazon store to find food for your family or any other grocery store at some point because it becomes cashless. So I'm sorry I digress here for a second, but that does become crucial to the connecting of dots, how they lure the masses in, right?
It's the bigger picture, isn't it? Depopulation, 15-minute cities. You've got the dumbing down of society. You've got AI, cashless society, and it all connects. And like you say, once the awakening happens, then There's no stopping it really.
Well, I think that's the setting. So, but yeah, so to your point, at Salem Times, I hope that's not the case for us, but I don't discount anything. There was a picture, again, it's legit at a thing called Incas, Inkas. It's an armored vehicle company in Toronto, Ontario. They had UN trucks stationed there. Maybe just freshly painted them. Maybe got a contract. Maybe. But in 2021, why were they there? There was no peacekeeping missions in Canada. And certainly, why were you making trucks ready to evade for what? I've never heard this before. They had no contracts to make armored vehicles for the UN to say in Darfur or in Sudan or in Ethiopia. No, or in Croatia or even Cyprus. I'm thinking, we've never had that on Canadian news. Oh, yeah. It would have made bigger news splash. It didn't. Someone found it, took a picture, said, why are our UN armored trucks in Toronto in 2020 during the pandemic when all of us were hiding in our houses? It's just, it could be a coincidence. I don't think so. But you see how nefarious this gets much deeper. Are they prepping for something that when those of us who don't comply, we're going to get in
The
trouble?
worst footage I saw was from Canada, under Trudeau, and it was the isolation camps. And people, if they stepped 1 yard over the line in their little square that they'd been given to sit in for a week or whatever it was, some of the protests where they were just cracking people around the head and around the backsies, police had just lost their minds. And a lot of it from Canada, a lot of it from New Zealand, and these two socialist leaders that were very anti-socialist in their behaviours towards
Yes.
COVID dissidents to start with. But it's filtered through into the UK now. There's probably about 10 or 15 doctors that have spoken out. And they've answered with their career. Up until recently, two of my good friends have been struck off. All of them have been gaslit into they're mentally unwell. I've got my psychiatric assessment coming up in a week or two that the
Good luck.
Medical
Good luck.
Council
Yeah.
have instructed a specialist psychiatrist, even though I've had 3 psych reports all say, there's a lot of stress obviously related to a 3-year investigation that when you've been
Wow.
accused of something you haven't done. But it's that gaslighting. I see it with the vaccine injured, gaslighting. You're
Mhm.
mentally unwell. Even yesterday, I spoke to a guy who's really, really sick, 32. His life's been taken away from him. He's mentally unwell and he's got functional neurological disorder, which means he's making it up. And he's got all these neuroinflammatory symptoms, fits and strokes as a 32-year-old. And it just makes me sick. So this psychiatric card is well known to be part of the playbook. We've seen it with Semmelweis back in the day. We've seen it with Frances Kelsey with thalidomide. She was a lunatic, turned out to be a hero. She was right about thalidomide. So anyone who steps out of the status quo, particularly when it's got a lot of pharma funding behind it, becomes targeted.
Well, you guys, especially in that sense, because pharma has a vested interest to ensure the medical community complies at all costs, from the GP all the way to the specialist in any category, because you cannot be the wrong face for people who have had trust in you can no longer afford not to have trust in you. So there's a vested interest for sure. You're actually hit another thing. So Trudeau did invoke for a short period the Emergency Measures Act, which for some people say that's for when there's a wartime issue. There certainly wasn't warranted for that, but he put that in. And he did freeze bank accounts. Now that's important to recognize because those were small tests, but a test enough to show. And then yes, you said there was really. I know people went to the Ottawa event. There were peaceful events. There were communities coming together, putting tents up, feeding the poor, bouncy castles for kids. They don't show you about the news. They show you that there were weapons. There were no weapons ever. But I could show you paramilitary guards on the apartment buildings with snipers ready to kill.
Weren't they zapping people with like burning
Well,
them?
they might have been doing that too. I think
Rectangles.
there might have been 5G or 6 being tested for sure, MLK. But I do know they had real military guys watching to make sure that no one got out of control. What was really a testament is that now you got to ask yourself, Bilderberg. So again, I put that word in there. Bilderberg is huge. Now, Chrystia Freeland now she had 2 portfolios, Minister of Finance, Deputy Prime Minister. She's a player. She's not an idiot. He never adjusted her portfolio while in cabinet. He always made sure that. So she's in control, not Justin. Justin's just a face, like Elon Musk. He waves. Hi everyone, I love you. Thank you, Justin. Next, he's a bad man. He's not a good, but so he invoked the Emergency Measures Act. He puts in freezing of bank accounts. These are tests, just little tests to say how far can the Canadians go. And then those military guys, by the way, they weren't cops. They had no name badges. There are no name. I saw a video. These are brought in mercs or brought in military guys that are told crack a few heads. No one's going to investigate you because you're stepping over the lines. I've done nothing. I'm waving my hand for that placard and you smash me in the head. You're like, where's the freedom of assembly? That's what we're supposed to have at, or the right to protest. So those are all done. I know, but see, you and I say, oh, Steve and Dave are also, they're crazy. They've been reading into too much, or they spun it. I had my sister. I love her to death. Okay, those crazy protesters. I'm like, what are you talking? What did they do to you? She sees them at malls sometimes in the cities. And she says, I'm so angry at them. I said, but what did they do to you? Well, I can't believe they're wasting whose time? They've taken an interest to hold a Canadian flag and go to a mall and say Canada needs to be free. What's wrong with that? They said nothing about hate and it's very interesting. But the mindset of these people. So my sister, I love her, we're not on the same page. She said you've
This is
changed.
power,
Too
isn't
bad.
it, of labels and division, and that's again a part of the bigger plan. Divide on the race, on the politics, on the sexuality, on the genders, on everything. And then if everyone's wittering on and arguing with each other, then they're not
We can't come
spotting
together.
they're not spotting the people dropping down the vaccine injuries, for example. So on that score, what's your view on that, Steve? When did you start seeing or hearing become suspicious of vaccine harms? Was it mainly from academic publications or government data, or did you start seeing people getting sick? What's your view on
Yeah,
vaccine?
well, my own personal account, I can tell you. Now, here's the joke, as you would know. Anybody over 80, sadly, I'm not making fun or being disrespectful. They say, well, you've had a good life, so therefore they don't seem to see the severity and or the criticism that could come from saying, even at 80, some people could live to 95 and they're dead. I know three people now, but just over 81 had a heart attack, then had the cancer in the throat. The other one had cancer. The other one had two bouts of pancreatic cancer. Then it finally took her out. And I'm saying, okay, but for me to say to you or anybody else over 80, you say, well, Stephen, doesn't really count. But it does count because I know for a fact these people took 3 shots each. Proudly. They told me, like, and they didn't know that my wife and I hadn't. We were incognito, if you will, like, oh yeah, the vaccine, sure. Oh, I took my 3, like almost like a badge of honor. Like it was very weird. So then I started looking at funeral homes. I don't know if you follow John O'Looney, right or wrong, good or bad, John. He's awake and he's like he's seen it on the table. Now I was going to funeral homes. I knew a couple of guys in the industry here, and I phoned him up and said, how's business? He said, it has been better. I said, well, we've seen lots of car accidents, bus like what do you mean better? He said, I've had one hot and we're talking Toronto's very big with competition. He had like 53 in 1 month. He says, unheard of. And so I went and looked at I perused the website politely and just looked at names. And we're talking young names. And everyone, I'll do screenshots for you from his own website. And he's in on it. He's not John O'Looney. He's believing COVID's real, the vaccines save lives. He's dialed out. And I'm looking at John, 23, suddenly. Bill, 41, suddenly. And they're actually writing this in the obit. The old obits we used to write when my mother passed.
Yeah.
Oh, she was great. Died not suddenly. Had been suffering from congenital heart failure, whatever you want to, for years, and managed. And you put a little note. This is to the point. Like I don't know if they're doing it on purpose, but they're not John O'Looney's funeral home. This is in Canada, and I could count. My wife and I went through a back door it. So many at young age saying suddenly and unexpectedly in their actual obit bio, which is unfounded and doesn't make sense. I wouldn't want to brag about that, but I guess you're so shocked
Mm.
that your 23-year-old son dies. Say I came home, he died unexpectedly. Yeah, because there was no comorbidities showing you that little John at 23 should be dead on your floor. He doesn't have an aneurysm from 20 years ago. He didn't have a debilitating muscular dystrophy. He didn't have multiple sclerosis. We're talking John was playing hockey last weekend, and now John's dead on the kitchen floor. Oh,
Mm.
he had a heart attack. And now the marketing campaigns, not pharma, big business is saying heart attacks are normal in kids. I mean, it's heart wrenching, pun intended. At hockey arenas in Canada, because we play hockey here, it's always have an AED, right, the atrial defibrillator, and know the signs of a heart attack. I'm thinking, I played hockey all my life. I never had if anything, maybe a skate might cut you, and even that was like 1 in a billion. You're telling me kids are now having heart attacks at 14, 15 years old, and it is. What I'm also noticing, sorry, is lots of broken ankles and legs, and all kinds of kids. Soccer, we call it soccer, you call it football. Real football, we call here pass the ball, hockey. All at my kid's school, I know we're all jabbed because there was a mandate before we went to, when we went to school after a mandate, so we didn't have to get jabbed. And I'm like, I see 14, 15-year-old boys in great shape, all broke, always legs. I see ladies at stores with legs. Think there's some of the osteoporosis with this, the mRNA, to maim people. But again, it's speculation. I can't prove it. But there's an inordinate amount of it. It's seen everywhere, but no one wants to talk about it. There's no causal relation.
So
But there
again, but
is.
you've seen in your life, you've seen that inflection point. Like you say, you went
Yes, I
digging
see
around the funeral homes and the obituaries, but generally
neighbors
people
here.
seem to know a lot more cancer patients that have got these rapid cancers or blood clots or heart issues in young people. And the problem is like those documented obituaries, there's not going to be a sub-analysis of their vaccine status and never will be. It's very simple. In fact, a paper was released 2 days ago that has looked at the UK's ONS data about the excess mortality, and it's terrible. It's damning, and it should be over every front page of the newspaper that this excess mortality is accounted for on the whole by the vaccinated cohorts to each degree of
Yep.
vaccine received, and the unvaccinated are doing okay. You're doing okay.
Well,
And
and that drives a point, two things. So there's two neighbors I'll specifically say, I won't say their name, but one neighbor in particular I saw him one day carrying the garbage bins in. Next day I see the ambulance come. And it took a while. I thought maybe he had passed. He didn't. I've now since seen him, but he's maimed. He's probably about 59, 60. Not the best of shape, but he certainly took the jab, but massive heart attack or a stroke, and he's not the same guy. But neighbor, now here's this is more relevant to you. So a neighbor is 43, family of so-called breast cancer. She herself doesn't necessarily have it, but gets tested once a year. She's unvaccinated. She's dialed in. So she went to her appointment out in Toronto, and she came back and talked to my wife and I and said, "Oh yeah, it's very funny. The first time they ever asked her in these 3 years, because you usually don't get asked. You got asked when you first went to the hospital during the COVID. Now no one asked, but this time, just this year, they asked her. They said, "Listen," they said, "Susan, did you get vaccinated?" And she was scared. She tried to phone her husband and said, "What do I do?" Because maybe we're trying to find out if you're not vaccinated, we're not going to give you any services. So
mm,
she panicked. She said she phoned her husband. Her husband said, "Tell the truth." And then so sure enough, here's the modus operandi. She tells the truth, and the doctors there go, "Okay, no, you can still be served. You're unvaccinated because we're seeing an inordinate amount of breast cancer, and we had to be sure when we do your mammogram." She was like, she freaked out because she's trying to say, because if she was vaccinated and she didn't show signs of breast cancer, she'd be one of us in the cohort. See, guinea
mm,
pigs. They got the cohort of a study, but that's why I want to know what her true was she really vaccinated or not? And when she said I'm not, they were able to validate that she's unvaccinated and no signs of breast cancer. They're seeing an allotment of people saying, "Yeah, I took the jab happily. Oh, and I got breast cancer." You see,
mm.
and that's just one department of cancer. Never mind the pancreatic, liver, or onset. But when I go see my doctor, it's just when I go once a year. So we got in an argument. It's a funny story, and I won't say his name, but he has a mask on. And I've known this guy for years. And because in the industry, I call him by his first name. I said, "Hey, Alex, how are you?" He goes, "Stephen, where's your mask?" And it's on my wrist here. I said,
You're
"It's here."
still
He goes,
alive, Stephen. You haven't had the
he
chance.
goes, "Well, it won't do you any good on your wrist." I said, "It won't do any better on your face." Now, because we come from the industry, he knows I know what I'm talking about. He's looking at that. Here's what it is. He wouldn't give a tongue depression. A typical, no, he looked at my ear, wouldn't touch my mouth because I might have COVID.
You were
He sat
emitting
back
black
in the
smoke
chair.
from your mouth at the time.
Yeah, it was just, I lost a dear friend, but a guy, but a colleague, but I would have said he was, I brought him on advisory boards. He was a bright guy. He's not the same guy. He bragged, he said, "I've taken four." He had two masks on. I said, he's done. I said, the bout of psychosis in people now is crazy for the medical community, especially who say we're wearing masks when you're, even if I was 6 feet apart, he still wore his double mask and was bragging. "I took four." And I was like, "I took none." So he probably put that in my chart. Probably now I'm flagged. But here's the joke. I've
Anti-vax.
gone for other mitigating issues with other specialists, and I see them. They'll ask me everything. Do you drink alcohol? Do you smoke drugs? Do your sex life? All the random questions. Never once has anybody said, "So, Steve, did you get the mRNA vaccine?" No one. It never happened. It's like we moved the chapter book. I said, but COVID's still happening apparently with long COVID and the fear on the TV. But
I
no
mean,
one says, "No,
it's
are you
some
vaccinated?"
pandemic, isn't it? Lasting what, 5 years and peak after peak after peak. They've got these crazy names. Kraken we had at one point, and we had
Yeah,
Omicron and all the various incarnations, and they came out with some really strange ones. And then Mpox, then that came
Mpox. Well,
out. I
that's a
mean,
good one. Yep.
they'd have been after you, Steve, because you had, if you don't mind me saying, you had a splenectomy, so they'd have
Yes.
really put some pressure on you to. Because you would have been vulnerable, you were going to die of a
Yes.
deadly
Yeah.
disease. Did
I
you have much pressure from the medical profession on you?
They know my status. They've never asked if I received anything. And that's another thing. You think out of due diligence, let's say it really was real COVID and that the mRNA was saving lives, wouldn't you as a physician say, "Stephen, I'm looking at your medical history and I don't, did you take it? Because you have a splenectomy. You really do need to take this." And I was, "Oh my God, thanks for reminding me. Yes, where can I get one now?" No. They don't, it's like an afterthought, or they don't give a flying donut. They're like, "Who cares?" Like, it's almost like, and I think sorry, this ties into my another dot. Sorry, David. Neurodegenerative. I really think there's something happening at both. So some of the physicians I'm meeting now are not the same guys I know that I worked with post vaccination or post gene therapy. There's no way. They're forgetful. They're not on cue. They're not with it. Or
Got a bit of a glaze across the face.
yes, or
I've
just
seen it. I've seen
oh
it.
yeah, yeah. No, we'll get to it. I had one guy. My blood pressure's a bit low once, and I said, "Do you want to do it here in the office?" No, I'm good. I'm like, no, but you're not listening. I don't think I'm good. He said, no, you're fine. I'm like, you're just guesstimating. But that's not the same guy. But what I said, no, absolutely, roll your sleeve up. Let's get this done. So something's wrong here. Now, the other thing I got to tell you, I talked to a cardiologist. I won't say his name. Another high wig guy, great guy. But first, I drank with him in Prague. Okay, that's the kind of fun things we did. All these cardiology guys. So
No, not
he
gonna
knows
ask.
me well, and I looked at him. I said, "Hey," and now here's the joke. Inside the hall of the hospital, we got the mask on. In the office, like you and I say, we're in the same room, no mask on. Right there, I'm like, so I said, I'll make his name up, Bill. I said, Bill. I said, listen, what's going on with myocarditis? Oh, Stephen, come on. He tapped me in the arm, like very condescending. It's transient. You're weighing in on too much of this. Don't worry about it. And listen, tell you what, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. I know we didn't finish my.
To get
I'm like,
out.
yeah. He's like, I'm like, you bugger. Now I love the man. He's a good friend, but I'm like, another one yet. Just it's transient. I said, my myocarditis is transient. I said, if I had said that to you 5 years ago, he would have scolded me, saying, I'm the cardiologist. Don't you dare say something stupid like that. But now it's like it's transient.
There were
It's
massive
not
studies though,
there.
weren't there, from the Far East that were saying troponin levels. They were claiming it was a
Yeah.
mild thing, but their troponins were high on these young
Yep.
cohorts. And troponin, as we know, is it's cardiac
A
damage.
marker.
Cardiac doesn't regenerate like neurological
Yeah.
tissue. So any raised troponin ain't good for you. And yet, it's again, cardiologists.
Transient.
Where are these cardiologists, Steve? Where are these oncologists speaking out? You mentioned earlier. I keep campaigning for as part of a general. When you see a patient first off the bat, they walk into your surgery. You do a history, and you do what the presenting problem is, the history of it, what's their medication history, comorbidities. It should be standard issue to ask now. Well, how many did you have? But they're not. And if you don't look for something and document something, then you can't ever, we both get correlation isn't causation. Well, it's a beautiful crime when you think about it, because how do you prove those funerals were in those young cohorts were from the
Sure.
vaccine? You can say that they're distinct from the peak of the pandemic in terms of temporally, and they were close temporally to the administration of the vaccine. I know people that dropped down dead within a day of it. Yeah, it's long COVID that caused their death in a 30-year
Yeah.
old who'd had the Moderna yesterday, for example. It's insane. How do you I mean, the average doctor, obviously, this is a multifaceted answer, and I've got my
Sure.
opinion, but why is the average doctor not speaking out? I know it's a slightly different system in Canada to what it is in the
Yeah.
UK NHS, but is it the money? Is it the complicity? Is it the psychology? Is it the damage? Is it all of the above?
I think damage is I think a lot of them now, it's been 4 years in, and I think a lot of them have at least 3 shots, and I think there's something neurologically being done, even if it's not immediate. I think the second thing would be, I think there's I don't know if it's because you guys, and I said this in a nice way, but all doctors went through med school, whatever country, whatever university, there's an indoctrination program. I really believe that, because at face value, some of these doctors, I just say, here's your study, and you take it at face value because it's a peer-reviewed journal from New Medical Journal. So you're all not going to say, oh, I think Dr. Kildare doesn't know what he's talking about. The p-value was, and this is the protocol we're using, and that's it. And then your brain thinks, next time you see a patient, XYZ, oh, the protocol for that is to administer this, and some things are legit, right? Like dehydration, get the dextrose and saline. I get all that. But when it gets to this point with the GPs, it's called just write a script. Don't you got a cold? Hold on. What do you want?
Antibiotics.
You want amoxicillin? I got amoxicillin with clavulin. Like the list. I'm like, then I used to tell them, and I told them, I said, you're doing rates of what we call, antibiotic resistance. Please stop this. Because some of the doctors, I think the guys, now Dr. Lowe, by the way, had passed away. He legitimately died in 2010, I think, of cancer. Sweet. But he was not one of those doctors you could buy off. He did ad boards and stuff, but he was always disclosed and very open about things, a very approachable doctor. So I gave him a lot of street cred, and he climbed the corporate ladder. They said that you were the chief medical microbiologist at Mount Sinai. So he's legit, but most are unscrupulous. Just where's my paycheck? What do I got to do? There's a guy here on, for the love of whatever you want to say, Jesus or whoever you love. I'm like, this guy is so bought off. He'll spew whatever he's told to spew. So there's money take on that, and there's probably best in interest climbing his ladder. Maybe it's blackmail. But if you don't position the next memorandum in a certain way, then this is not going to be good for your career. Like we got to make. I think there's a hidden agenda behind the scenes, where the politicians are also in play, right? To keep this I want to say charade, but this dark, nefarious lie up that people continually stay in. And those who are in, like I've met some secretaries at the front desk, and they'll look at you, they give you a certain look like, uh-huh, yeah, COVID. And then but but then they also go quiet because they look and say, when no one's listening, what am I gonna do? I gotta fight, I gotta feed a family. Like you, I gotta feed a family. I got money to bring home. So I'm not gonna raise my voice. I'm not gonna say anything. But that's how they get us. And now, as you probably know in England, I can't speak what you have, but the inflation here is crazy. We have a product called maple syrup. It's naturally made here. You can't get it in, and you can't even get it in Vermont and New York, I think a little bit. Otherwise, it really is a Canadian thing, Ontario and Quebec. That's it. Worldwide. You can't go to Malaysia to get it. The prices have gone up. Why? And I asked this from $10 to $15, and people don't understand.
Ukraine, it's Ukraine's fault.
Yes, well, yes, well,
We've got the
we need
same thing with olive oil. We've got olive oil coming in at double, like at 10 quid and above now. It used to be a quid or two.
But you understand, but people don't understand. Oh, just it is what it is. No, no one asked that question, which is a question mark you put in. So now Canada, just so I may, some of the other Brits I talk with. And by the way, my dad was an ex-Brit, just so we're clear. RAF, all that stuff. I actually curse him now. Why didn't he just move to the States where it's warm in Florida? Because I don't like cold winters anymore. But that's just my 2 cents, Dave. But when he was over there, and getting back to this, he said, I remember saying, like, the economy. Why is it that your economy, your currency is 2.2 to mine? And see, it's another dot connection. You guys even have a stronger currency than the so-called greatest nation on the earth called Americans. And I'm thinking, yeah, why is their dollar less? When I asked the American, like, they don't know. I said, how is the pound worth better than that? And why is the euro better than America? And I say this nicely, if America's the biggest economy of the money and the power, even though it's broke, $36 trillion again, right? You put that dot. But I've always wondered, so, and we get ripped off in Canada. My dollar's worth nothing. It's almost like a peso. But I always said, like, why is Britain this beautiful little country? But my dad comes from. Why am I being? And I tell the Americans, why is your dollar better than mine? What are you doing that's better than me? It's a game of shell. It's all lies and deceit, as you know. It falls under central bankers, Bilderberg. And so I think there's more to be said, but that all plays into medication costs, healthcare costs, and then certainly people wanting to keep their job. They don't want to talk out. So I do applaud you and Doc Malik and guys who said, I can't do this anymore. Because once you're awake, I think it's very hard. So I couldn't go back to the industry. If they phoned me and said, 300,000. I said, I can't do it because there's a line of morality I just can't do. I won't, right? There was the mandate in Toronto for us. So our family left the school. Now it was a private school. So you say, well, they didn't have to adhere to it, but we did. So we left. And most people looked at me and said, oh, you're crazy. I'm like, I'm not taking something that hasn't been tested for a disease state that hasn't been recognized for me to say it makes sense for me. So I'm going to walk away. I think we're the only family that did. And a lot of people just looked at us with, but now I lost friends over that because they had friends, ready, whose family members still worked at Toronto Public Health. And then that breath told me, you're still participatory. I mean, even if you're a janitor at Toronto Public Health, you're making money from the same people who are paying others to inject kids. That's my line. So I lost some friends over that. I'm not making this up. Like, so I said, I took a line in the sand morality saying, if you're hurting kids, hurting anybody, and with good conscience, now that I'm awake, how could I live myself to say, sure, you keep working, making money, because she just wanted her pension. She wanted her job back. She even got fake papers and still worked at the same industry. So I'd say, that's me going to work for Pfizer as the janitor. Well, I'm not killing the people. I don't work for Borla. Yeah, you do. You work for Pfizer. You're getting a contract payment from them, even if you're sweeping the floors at the main building. It's sinful. It really, but no one takes a stand. So like you, this is what we got left. Like we're down to 4 of us in our family. It's very tight. I lost a lot of friends and family. It's been very hard. And
How's it been for you? How's it been for you online? Have you been targeted by my friends, the Mutton Crew, as we call them, but the trolls that seem to only ever attack on the X platform? That anyone that says anything in support of me or support of anti-vax position, then they get attacked by a group. Have you ever
well,
met my
there's a
friends?
group out there. Yeah. Well, again, so maybe oddly enough, perhaps for myself, I'm not as big as you, and good on you for being the bigger cohort of followers. But it's my 3rd time around because every time I got kicked off or was something went wrong with it, and there's a couple of these guys you got to be careful of. But you see, part of this method of revelation is they tell a bit of truth, but there's a bigger nefarious narrative behind it. Just and they have to give you little bits, like a mouse. You give a little bit of cheese, but you won't get the whole pie. So you start to believe them, like Andrew Tate, a shill. That's a real shill. A lot of these guys that talk a certain game, you're like, no, and the followers are 10 million or so I think that's tough. So a lot of these doctors, I have a little hesitancy. There's another guy.
Just before you say, I'm not going to give an opinion either way. I'm
No,
going
no,
to
don't, no,
disclaim
no,
it.
no. And I was on Robert Roland. I love the man. I thought at first he was the first guy that outspoke. Zelenko has his the Zelenko protocol. Do you even need that? Because now I'm thinking, and I like vitamins. Don't get me wrong. But do you need that if the COVID doesn't exist? So why are we taking to it if you're fighting if it doesn't exist? And maybe he had the best intentions. Maybe he did.
I think the
He's gone
pathogen really
also.
is whatever the mRNA encodes, whatever that is. It's
Well,
allegedly a
that may
spike
be,
protein, but is
but
it?
the wellness company, I think, has got more behind the scenes, and we can talk about that on another podcast or behind the scenes. I can give you some information. Paulie does some deep dives on this, and it's all interconnected. Sorry, that's how this wheel spins. So you get people like Joe Rogan. He gets 250 million a year. At first, everybody thought he was amazing. Russell Brand, your Brit, full of banana peels, full of banana peels. The list goes on. You because you after a while you start seeing other truths come up. Whether he's making a statement sounds legit. You see, the division is so widespread to
It's funny they
fool
could
people.
these big accounts never come anywhere near the people like myself who are just a raw normal bloke who spoke out and lost everything. Wouldn't you want those stories on your podcast like Joe Rogan? I mean, the amount of times I get tagged on Joe Rogan's thread saying you need to speak to this guy, but they don't come anywhere near. The allegedly awake news places in the UK, GB News won't have me near. The BBC certainly won't have. I remember right at the beginning contacting all the mainstream media outlets in the UK, never got anything back. Then I went for the radio outlets, nothing. So there's this whole, they don't really want the story to be told. How are
Is there
things
a
now? Go on, sir.
sorry? Is there a bunch of people that you can now band with? Like maybe it's Doc Malik, maybe it's some other
Yeah, we've all
but
kind of found each other. I think we're all dots around the world, so there's international groups that we meet, and I'm a bit of a lone wolf, Steve. To be honest, I've always been because I've always felt the inaction, the direct actions have been absent from a lot of these groups, like actually doing stuff, like getting your
sure.
voice out there, And I keep saying to people, if you're not in trouble with the regulators now, I don't think you've done enough. That's my view. Writing strongly worded letters that are being filed, in the dustbin isn't enough when you're talking about genocide of children and pregnant women and their kids, and
Yeah.
there's not enough action. And I'm only just one voice screaming in the wilderness, and that's how I view it. Really, are things changing, Steve, in Canada? A bit of hopefully some positivity. I don't know the answer to this yet, but are you starting to see physicians awakening, even quietly, or members of the public, or even family just tapping you on the shoulder saying, "Steve, you were bang on, you were right," or not?
No, no, I'm actually I'm broken by that. I'll be very, very frank with you. My wife and I talk about this quite often. There's maybe one person we met who took three, who openly admit she wished she hadn't and didn't know why. She actually sent me a book on David Icke. That's how dialed in she was at the time. I thought, and yet you took it. She couldn't give an honest answer. And I bless her soul. She's nice to say, yeah, it's a pie mistake, and I live with my consequences. But everyone else, they're holding tight. Not one person, even they've told me he had some neurological issues. I know some people, they will never attribute it to the mRNA or what they call the vaccine. They'll never take, and it's almost like they don't want to be what's the word, a psychopathic. They're not like the deviant, they're not a deviant psychopathic killer, but they're so denial that they can't come to grips to think that they may have taken something that will cause them harm. So they'd rather be living alive along with the rest of the charade that I'm the crazy one, but I'm outspoken, but I overread things. I look into too much, and that I'm the problem, not the solution. And quite frankly, if they don't get sick and die, they're like, see, it's been 5 years and you're full of it. And I'm like, no, it's coming. It's
It's
coming. It's already
true
happening.
cognitive dissonance, true willful blindness. And when you look at all the layers of the psychology around it, the fear, the propaganda, the secondary gains from keeping in line, or should I say, avoiding the trouble that speaking out brings with you. Final question, really. What's your thoughts? I mean, we called out Elon, we called out Bill Gates and Pharma. What's
Yeah.
going on in America now? These Trump's come in. He's brought in Jay Bhattacharya. He's brought in RFK Jr. Have you got a new sense of hope with the new regime, or are there more actors?
Well, my statement would be actors. If that was my one line answer, like we're playing Alec Trebek on Jeopardy, I'd say it's one line actor. It's so well done. The mysticism, the illusion, the I don't want to get religious, but I mean I'd say this quite openly. But there's a nefarious group of people. There's words you can't say on Twitter. I think you know this. I won't say it here. We'll just let it go. But there's a certain uh, group of
I think
people that
I
if you
think I
say
know.
something, you get flagged. And Now, religiously speaking, it's twofold. There's some big, heavy accounts that have done some real deep dives, recognizing end of times. I'm not saying that's true or not, but they're making that same statement in relation to those who are saying the dark nefarious side. So we now agree that Satan's Super Bowl, we call it, and the Grammys, the Oscars in America have been all overrun by a nefarious. It's always red. It's always dark. There's devil Sam Smith, your British Sam Smith guy. The transgender wins. It's all very sick. Baphomet, we say the Baphomet, right? The devil, whatever. Even if they, let's just say the devil doesn't exist. I don't want to get in trouble here for your audience, but they believe at such an extent that he does that that's why it's being pushed so hard, right? There's an agenda for him. I really believe that. So if you look at the word MAGA, I'm not making this up. Church of Satan, MAGA stands for the highest level, the highest order. Go on their website, you won't get in trouble. Look it up. MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's the same slogan. That Marina Abramovich, that crazy woman who's a cooking spirit or something, I don't really want to follow her. I think she's nuts, but there's validity to these people insofar as people being attracted or believing what they do through their dark, nefarious concepts are sharing that. And it's being indoctrinated to our kids, hence the transgenderism, hence the idea that Baphomet is good or Moloch or Baal, all these. And I don't get caught up in that stuff. You won't see those tweets to me, but you'll see that I will look at what these people are doing. And MAGA was a crucial thing. So some call Trump the Antichrist. That's where I'm going. They actually haven't pivoted as the Antichrist. There's a book called The Last President. It's in the Library of Congress. Is it true? I don't know. I don't get caught up. I know they're doing something in Gaza. He puts out videos. It's not him. He's not tweeting like Musk. They're not. But the pretense is get the masses to believe. And the masses are buying this story. So the MAGA, we call it a cult. They actually believe he's going to do better. So I'm answering your question. Is Trump with Jay Bechara, right? I don't know if these people are being fooled or being told to participate. I thought Jay was legit. I would have put him down in the legit category. Absolutely, 100%. But when I see them being brought in, something else is telling me something's going on behind the scenes because none of these people had a lot of scruples. And if you just start siding with Trump, who is the father of warp speed, for the love of God, I say this to people, he's in on it. He's not about, but there are people saying, no, you don't understand, Steve. He's saving us. He's saving everything for last. He's going to turn the ship around. I'm like, he just filled the swamp he's supposed to drain. You've heard the term?
Yeah.
Lufkin. I mean, all these business guys. You see him seeing Musk at his Oval Office tells you he's not in control. Musk is calling shots, and even if he's not, people behind this, but people don't want to see that. They think Dodge is going to work. They're not banning the Federal Reserve like they should. They're not doing the IRS, the income tax. I'm just talking as an American. Those three things should have been done right away. They stopped the vaccinations. No, 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 no.
Where's Epstein's list gone as well? Seems to have disappeared from the news.
But that's a smoke. See, but people got fixated on that rather than talking about what you need. How about
Look over there. Look over there at that. Not over there.
But what about David Cartland's job? Let's get back to doctors peeking out. No, but let's not worry about that. Let's talk about Epstein's files. So people don't care about you, and I mean that not with insincerity, because they're like Epstein's files are more important. He's gonna. Please,
Yeah.
it's smoke and mirrors. It's a so anyway, Marina Abramovich, the crazy lady spirit cooker, calls him the magician. Maybe he is. I don't know. I'm not going to get bogged down with that. But what I do know, all the stuff they're doing on social media is to distract us and not have us keep our eye on the prize or the ball. And really what we should be looking at is a depopulation through maiming and death from an mRNA jab that's not been tested, but probably has gain of function. And at this point is recognizing that there's a world depopulation, masking people into 50-minute cities, making people sick through 5G. I mean, that was my closing statement. That's what I'd say. Just that's it. Because, but none of us are going to talk like that, David. You and I will talk about certain things, and they're going to go right back to frivolous stuff. Oh, Epstein files, or I think Ivanka is getting married tomorrow, or Trudeau has a party tomorrow night. The right people are there. It's Boris Johnson may come back on the fray of things. Keir Starmer is going for drinks tomorrow night with Rishi Sunak. I don't care. It's all just to distract you, right? But people love this. They're going down the wrong trail to find the truth. I think that's what it.
And people
Sadly,
have been conditioned, haven't they, about showbiz, and what the younger generation want to be. Now they want to be YouTubers or social media influencers, and everything's changed, hasn't it? It's all changed so quickly. But
have you had John O'Looney on your show?
I've had him on my subscribers group meeting. He's a great guy. I've known John for a long time. He's a good friend, and he's very, very articulate. I'd say he knows his stuff, and he's a brave man. Yeah, I know John well. He's a good guy.
Well, I wish there were more like you. And I said I appreciate the offer to even have me speak with you today. I am honored, and certainly I recognize the fact you put yourself out there. And I think having known doctors, because I worked with them for all those years. I know ones that are supposed to have taken a medical oath, and I admire you for taking a stand because you took a stand, but you know about humanity. So your medical oath is actually intact.
Yeah, my
It's
life
the
would have
other
been a
side
lot
of it.
easier, Steve, had I stayed quiet. But I couldn't. How can you sleep at night? And these were basics. I wasn't going for the deep stuff. I was going for basic medical ethics of informed consent, non-coercion. Lockdowns and masks. We've covered a little bit today. And when they went going through the ages down to pregnant women and children, that was frankly the last straw for me. And it
Sure.
culminated in me resigning my role because the same people that were saying they weren't going to jab their own children were jabbing your children down the vaccine centre and deploying the staff from the surgery, and that was the end of the ethical abhorrence that I was prepared to put up with. And then the rise to prominence from desperately trying to get my voice heard. I set up
Mhm.
PowerPoint presentations. I'd set up, I was knocking doors of managers and senior doctors saying, look, everyone getting COVID allegedly has had 2 jabs to stop them getting COVID. I did a little audit at the time and they had no answers. But then we started seeing the vaccine injuries come through and, oh, you can't prove it. Correlation doesn't equal causation. I was going into the coffee rooms with papers from the New England Journal of Medicine or the myocarditis study from Korea. And I was holding them, brandishing them in the coffee room, saying, guys, we don't meet up anymore. We don't do any clinical governance. We don't do any educational sessions. Let me just show you this data before we embark upon giving this to 17 and unders. And I got pushed in the room. I remember the time when the physios pushed me and said, I'm not listening to one of your effing conspiracy theories. And I got the New England Journal of Medicine in my hand and the Lancet in the other saying,
Yeah.
conspiracy theories, really? And then it's just been the most desperately sad time to watch, the public trust in the profession go down, the medical profession's ego go up. The real pandemic of ostrich syndrome, as I call it, ostrich
Mm.
syndrome, all the doctors with their heads in the sand. It's 2025. I remember doing
That's a good one.
I did a viral video that went around the world, and it was just me press record during. I just about to start a clinic, and I just put out a heartfelt appeal to my doctor saying, "Guys, it's 24 now. We've got to stop this. We're still giving jabs to kids to protect their granny, and we know it doesn't stop transmission. What are we doing?" And it went across the world, and that's where a lot of kind of interview opportunities. I just got battle weary in the end, and I stopped because it was breaking me. And obviously, throw in the GMC, 3 years of torture, and this is why a lot of my doctors say I get messages every single day from somebody in the medical profession saying how brave you are, well done, and I'm seeing this and I'm seeing that. And you ask them the question, why won't you speak out? I've got a couple of interviews later on in the week where the camera's got to be off. This Substack has been exclusively people who've left the
Yep.
industry they once were, and that's an indictment, really, of a sad indictment of what we're dealing with here, because they can only speak out after. Whilst we're working within the NHS, they were, I had a really horrible interview. I nearly choked myself with a lady that was put through a 4.5 year process coming out next week, where she just put in complaints about finding blood on blankets in the beds of another patient, or misidentification, x-raying the wrong limbs, putting CT scans through people's corneas, which you shouldn't do. And she was raising alerts in the right way, and she was a troublemaker.
Wow.
She's a persistent troublemaker and got struck off. Well, she got suspended and then an investigation of 4.5 years. And the people can see that. Doctors and nurses can see those people who whistleblow get punished. And it's a massive deterrent, and that's what they want at the end
Well,
of the day.
that's the theme is to show, right? If you talk out, then we can reprimand you to such a level. And how far do you really want to push your luck with that? And that's unfortunate because if everyone did what you just did, and a few other doctors, this paradigm would not only shift, maybe just crack, and we wouldn't have this issue, right? But most people are all about looking after themselves, and they know that. Whoever's running the car here, they know that the human ego is based on how to do self-preservation. And if I have to cut you off, David, so be it, because I got to look after myself. And that's unfortunate, right? It's a
Mm.
mindset that's not working. But I like to believe Ike when he says there's a truth vibration coming through. I really hope that is the case. Maybe David's a shill. I'm not saying good or bad. So far, I like the man, but I don't know. I just know that humanity needs to come together, and we're not. We're at a loggerhead. And I see it. So my wife went to the passport office, okay, to get, she doesn't wear a mask. She's not doing it. This is now, and people came by with masks on, and they said, "Good for you." So my wife said, "How about you take it off?" And they said, "Oh no, no, I'm here to get the passport." She said, "What do you think I'm doing here? I'm here to get the passport too. I'm just in the office, in a government office." Well, I don't know. And they go and they sit down and be compliant. In Quebec, the province, during the pandemic, I spoke to people. There was a curfew installed. That was the other test. Sorry, you had the financial freezing, you had the military pseudo no name crack your skull, and you had the Emergency Measures Act to try to bring in a military if need be. there was the fourth component in the only province of Quebec that authorized a curfew. You were not allowed to leave your house at 10 o'clock at night. You would have to have proof you had a physical dog to take a walk if you were caught. This is like at a Romanian, Czechoslovakian public theater, 1968. It's bizarre. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So, and I asked one of them. I said, "Did you not raise a stink?" Well, it doesn't bother me. I'm in bed by 10 anyhow. I said, "That's not the point." But you see how it's like, it doesn't affect me. So you know what? I said, what about people want to go out at 11 o'clock at night? I don't, 'cause maybe I'm not going out, but that's where humanity is not staying together. And they divided us very well.
And
That's
that
just,
and that's something again that's been conditioned, because I call it the me, myself, and I mentality. People are
yeah.
very introvert on their own hedonism now, their enjoyment of life. And if it doesn't affect, so what? If you see it often, when fights break out in streets, people get the camera out rather than intervene. That's the
Yes.
mentality now, rather than go and give somebody CPR. Somebody's fell on a train track, rather than get them
Insanity.
out, they get the camera out. And this is what we've got
Insanity.
now. And this is insanity. This is biblical in the Romans 1, where it says in the end times. We've talked a little bit about
Yeah.
end times. I haven't laboured the point. I'm a Christian myself, but this is
No,
end
no,
time prophecy, and we're seeing Romans 1, a reprobate mind. God will give people over to a reprobate mind in the end days, and I think we've discussed a lot of excellent examples of reprobate minds, aka insanity. And whether it's gender, whether it's pharma, and there's plenty of nods to pharmakeia in end times prophecy, 2 Thessalonians 2, 2
and
Timothy
I would,
3. I
I,
think
and I would,
we're seeing 2 Timothy 3 generation play out. There's never been a generation as per ad verbatim 2 Timothy 3. Not Romans, Revelation. How many mentions of pharmakeia 3, I think, in the end
yeah.
time. 2
Oh,
Thessalonians 2 talks about pharmakeia, and even the elect will be deceived. Yeah, the elect are deceived.
well, and I certainly concur with all that, what you said. I was not, one way or the other, not saying I'm not. I was raised Catholic per se, and I don't discount anything. I watch this almost like with a scope, looking down and seeing it play out. And I recognize that. And certainly, yes, Revelations, where is it? There's a great book here, if I may. Yeah.
I would always say to anyone while you're grabbing it, if no one, there we go. I mean, if you,
That's your Bill Cooper, but he was telling you the end of times prophecy before Revelations, the four horsemen, behold the pale horse. And he was considered a conspiracy theorist, and he was ex-naval intelligence. And this book, apparently, so here's a little ad hoc, just a little joke. This is the most stolen book in the world because people don't want to be known they bought it. This is probably worse for some, having bought this than say Mein Kampf. They'd be more embarrassed to have this as a purchase. Now he got it, but there's the famous Bill Cooper. But this book, he talks about the revelations and what's coming, and most people are in denial. And I'm like, no, it's get your what do you say? Get your chickens in order, like your eggs. What, like, you gotta. There's something more nefarious coming. It's coming, and most people are sleepwalking. And I don't
looks
know if
like
we can
one of
get enough
those
people.
must-have books alongside the real Anthony Fauci. That's another one, and Turtles All the Way Down's the other one I'd recommend.
Well, sorry, back to Anthony Fauci. This is important. Now, I've told OraSure is a company that does measurements and testing for HIV. Now, they say HIV is on, I don't know if it's on the rise, we'll see. But there's two schools of thought. There's a doctor called Dr. Tom Cowan. I don't know if you heard of him.
No, Tom Cannon. Yeah.
Yeah, and he may be good, maybe, I don't mean, he said viruses don't exist. Now, that puts us in a whole nother talk for another time. You and I could debate that in a good way or a bad way. But that would prove interesting, because if HIV is not, is that actually in the vial like many claim the mRNA has? It has a host of, we say, pathogens or things that are in there to cause or disrupt through a gene to cause a disease state to manifest. But I think, I wouldn't argue one way or the other, but I would argue whoever's in that gene therapy recognize what your DNA has. And if you already predetermined to say have testicular cancer or to have a heart attack or to have, an aneurysm, it's already programmed to flare it up, bring it up faster. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, and it goes right back full circle in the interview, really. That that guy who chastised you that day, with your
Yeah.
eureka moment, and he said,
Yeah.
and you thought he was a lunatic, and actually says, if we create the disease and then create the cure, we've got a money spinner here, and that's
Yes.
pharmaceutical industry in a nutshell. And going back to that, a patient cure is a customer lost, and you want your people to be perpetually ill. You want people to be reaching for their scripts, and it's a great business model. Hey.
Yes. Yeah. It's and that unfortunately now in hindsight, and I said I couldn't live myself. I don't discount the experience I had, and there are some moments that I think there were some, like there's a digoxin, heart medication that had been given to my as a beta blocker to my my neighbor who was a good friend of mine. He had muscular dystrophy. It probably kept his heart going to 44. You could say there are other variables, love, attention, family, and maybe the Shane's version of it, as much as if he wasn't maybe as problematic for every, but that digoxin did work. And for all intents and purpose, that and some antibiotics, I still believe medically they make sense. But everything else, total horse hockey, just awful, right? Like it's all meant to just create something and never resolve it and just make a cash cow. I mean, why do you think we all got paid so well? And in hindsight, I'm like, it's sinful. I mean, doctors used to get mad at saying, so you drive better cars than I said, no, I don't. They give us a standard American company car. They didn't want people showing off. But yeah, it was almost sinful, right? The all because we thought we were doing the right thing to help people when really all these diseases manifested through a paradigm or a scheme, a Ponzi scheme to make people sick. That's really what I mean. At the end of the day, all these things would happen. Now, I have to give credit to where credit's due, like McDonald's. They do a very good job at keeping people with obesity and diabetes. I'll give them that. But that's also maybe owned why the shares of BlackRock and Vanguard have shares in all these companies. But we don't want to talk about that because that would say there's a correlation there. We don't want to, but of course there is, right?
Yeah, you've
I
nailed
mean,
who's at the very top of the Ponzi scheme right there, and it's probably a good place to stop. And my kids are getting restless as well because I've got to go to football training. Stephen, it's been absolutely amazing chatting to you. I really appreciate your time, and the discussion's been amazing. So I think it's going to go really down well with the viewers.
well, feel free to edit where you need be, as I know I put a lot of extra stuff in there and I do talk sometimes a bit off topic. So please
No, it's all
condense.
about the
Yeah.
dots, and that's what we need people to do: connect those dots, because it's not just been about COVID. That's blatantly obvious. It's about all the other peripheral issues, and it's all kind of coming together in one grand Ponzi scheme.
If
Worldwide.
you ever do a podcast with other doctors and other people, I'd love to meet, whether you bring any other British or an Australian or a New Zealand or another Canadian, I'd be happy to just even just listen in just to get feedback. The more knowledge is power, and the more we share, the more we have a chance to get the word out, even slowly but surely, right? Like trickles out. I think there's more to that than staying silent. That's just me.
It'll be a really interesting one. I'm being asked by a lot of my followers at the moment to set up this "Do viruses exist?" debate, and it would be great to have you on there with Tom Cowan and the couple of the Baileys, Mark and Sam Bailey, and have sort
Yeah.
of 3 or 4 microbiologists in virology and have it
Okay.
out. It might be good to referee that one because a lot of my first degree was in virology. So I'm ever learning these concepts of terrain theory, germ theory, and I'm somewhere in the middle.
But
I'm not a
wouldn't that
denier just yet, but.
let's say for base value that it's all legit. Okay, that's fair. But wouldn't we start to agree that when the pharmaceutical industry was being made, say 1913 through the Rockefeller Institute, wouldn't one make the conclusion that those who were putting together this package, if you will, would have it set up that things would be proven, at least in their way, so that it'd be hard to go against it. So if you said, well, mold, from the moss makes a vaccine, it makes penicillin, is okay. So then I don't know. I'm just because now it's been set in stone. No one's ever going to question if a virus is. But Tom Cowan says it hasn't been done. I don't know. I mean, he sounded well in his speech. I haven't found it. I may have got scrubbed. 5 minutes of some very good information. So anyhow, that's for a sidebar.
Yeah, I mean, my education would have been looking in a textbook where they've got electron microscopy images of said viruses, but then you
Yeah.
look at exosome structure and what that looks like, exosome packaging heavy metals and exuding it from cells, and they look a bit like viruses. So I'm going to leave it there before I get shut down on Twitter for
No,
being
no, please don't.
antivirus as well as anti-vax. So
I'm not anti-virus. I'm just, it's something I'm willing to consider, but absolutely. Always a pleasure. And thank you for having me today. I really
thank
appreciate
you.
that.
It's been a unique insight from sort of behind closed doors in pharma, and anyone
Industry,
else
yeah.
who works in pharma who sees this and wishes to come on and to give their side of it, that'd be great as well. So I hope you've been an inspiration to anyone on the retirement side of pharma or at the back end of their career that's willing to sort of discuss what they've seen
Right.
from behind the closed doors of this. I'm not going to
Yep.
say murky industry because it's not always been, but as you talked about
No,
at the
no.
beginning, but standards have changed, haven't they, in
I
lockstep?
think that things got blurred, and I think people just saw money sign more than ever. Money's always been there, but more than ever. And I think people, but also maybe people, I think, got duped legitimately, believing there are doctors who really believe COVID's real and that they're doing the best they can to save humanity. As weird as that sounds, they're putting all marbles in because they believe that, right? So it's hard to get undoctrinate them, and that's another area of challenge. But anyhow, I think hope more people wake up, and I applaud you again, doctor, for standing your ground. Thank you.
I'm just doing my job. I don't. I always rebut that because I don't see any other way, and I don't see how the doctors that aren't speaking out are reconciling that with their family, because the future that's going to happen to us all is going to happen to their children. They're going to be replaced by the AI that we talked about. They're going to be subject to the same cashless society in 15 minutes cities that all of us lunatics have been identifying and calling out. So it's part of my job and part of my oath and part of what I train to be. So I'm not a hero in any way, shape, or form. I don't accept that. But thank you for saying it.
No, brilliant,
Bless you,
brilliant. Anyhow,
Steve. It's been amazing, and we'll
bless
get
you
this out in
too.
a few
Thank you.
weeks. And take care.
Keep in touch. Thanks.
All right, take care. Bye.
Bye, Dave.